It's showtime with Dr. Kris. Dr. Kris, how are you?
Man, I'm really good. It's a beautiful day in Texas. I cannot complain. It's only in the 80s and we had rain last night. So, two things
Yeah,
we like to see in Texas.
lots of rain. I'm going to run the intro. You ready? So it's the DrKris.Life podcast where we get to discuss all sorts of cool topics that impact our health to an audience that wants to work with their doctor and improve their path. Hey, so today we're going to talk about how nutrition combats obesity and other chronic illnesses. Dr. Kris, we've been talking about these peptides that help folks lose weight, but losing weight is like this really complicated thing that you have to address several things: your attitude, your self perspective. You learn how to eat a little bit different. It's a lifestyle change, but it's so hard to stick to that, and a lot of people fail on that. Why is that such a struggle?
Well, I think it's because we're humans, right?
Mm,
And so it's the one thing, the major point that I have to try to get across with my patients. I'm just like them. I struggle just like they do with diet. I have times where diet is really, really good, and I have times where my diet is not so good. Life gets in the way. We go on vacations and things like that. And I think, we all kind of use those. When I say all of us, the vast majority of us use when we go on vacation or on a trip, like, well, I'm just going to loosen my diet a little bit. And then, that's why I always advocate when you are on trips to at least stay in the gym. Because the further we get away from our habits, there's this old saying, if you're out of the gym for a week, you start all over again when you enter that gym again. And I think that's more of a mental block, because, oh, well, I didn't make it yesterday. I'll go tomorrow. And it becomes that way with the diet. Like, how many times I've done this? I can't tell you how many times. Monday morning, I'm going to start my healthy eating, which means today on Sunday, I'm going to eat like crap because tomorrow's a clean day, right? And those are the things that really, really, kind of get us in trouble. But, some of the stats, because, you and I haven't talked about it, but since the last time we did a live podcast, I was in London and for the Cellular Medicine World Congress. And my topic again was talking about weight loss and GLP-1 use and that sort of thing. There's some stats that are just really, really amazing. That 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese. 2/3. 1/3 of Americans, of adult Americans, are insulin resistant. Something you and I talk about all the time is insulin resistance. 1 in 6 actually have what we call metabolic syndrome, which is even worse than insulin resistance. It's on down the path. Okay. So, I just think those are staggering numbers. I always tell patients, here in our town, common place to go is Chili's. You go into Chili's and I say, just look around. How many people would you say are in reason? I'm just going to go with a reasonably good shape, and the number's low. It really is. And the really sad part now is we see it in our young patients, our children, our teenagers. We're seeing them being vastly overweight. We're seeing insulin resistance and diabetes. I used to rarely see insulin resistance in my teenagers, okay, patients. We see it routinely now. And so why is that? Like, why are we seeing this big change? Well, it's diet. It's diet and lack of activity. A lot of kids ate bad we may have ate bad when we were kids, but fast food wasn't quite as common. Mom didn't run out to, and by the way, I'm not casting stones because Lord knows my wife and I are guilty of this too. So, I'll take the punishment as well. But it's been a long day. You're busy. You run through Chick-fil-A's drive through or McDonald's or wherever. Pick any of them. They're all about the same nutritionally. And you run home and you feed your kids that are now sitting on their PlayStations instead of being out in the yard playing or something like that, because the world just isn't what it used to be. We're not even feel comfortable with our kids running around outside all the time these days when they're young. So inactivity, but mainly diet. These diets are just, they're horrible. And, it's one thing when I talk to other doctors or other providers, I try to get or even patients, GLP-1s, as you and I have talked about over and over, semaglutide, and then our combination GLP-1 GIP agonist, tirzepatide, amazing products, amazing peptides. Let's use the right term, amazing peptides. Will they fix you alone? Hell no, they won't. You've got to do your work. You know, you and I talked off air that we do have occasional patients that don't have the responses I'm looking for. Why is that? Well, sometimes there can be a little more going on. Most of the time, all they're doing is they're eating less, but they're still eating the Snickers bar, as I always joke. So maybe they're not eating the whole Snickers bar, but they're eating half of it. So these patients, you know, it's our job as providers, to help educate our patients on what health. And by the way, I despise the word diet. To me, diet has always meant something I do from point A to point B, and then I revert back to point A. In other words, I want to lose 20 pounds, and so I'm going to do this diet. I'm going to lose the 20 pounds. I'm going to revert back to my bad diet, gain it back. So when I use the word diet, I really don't mean it in the word, you know, as far as like Atkins diet. I use it in the term of how we're going to eat for the rest of our lives.
I think for me, it's lifestyle. And I've told this to you several times, but in my head, I knew I needed to eat better, but there's so many headwinds that we're fighting. And plus, I want to enjoy a beer and I want to relax. And so one of the things that was off the table as far as consideration was a couple of beers an evening, right? But when I saw my labs and how certain my pancreas was having to work too hard, that was really persuasive to me to go, oh my gosh, I've been holding this thing that I wasn't going to even consider, and I need to. Otherwise, I see what's going to happen. That pancreas is going to break down, and then the backup system is going to have to come in, and eventually, I'm forced into a lifestyle change.
Or yes, absolutely. Or you're forced into taking a bunch of medicine to try to keep yourself healthy, right? Or healthier.
Hmm.
You know, it's we're very lucky because I saw a post the other day someone did, a doctor did, and I thought it was very good. It's something that I talk about all the time, and it was as a physician, or it was if you're a physician, it was geared towards a patient. It says if your physician diagnosed you with diabetes and they've been seeing you for years, and basically they just diagnose you on a lab panel, they weren't doing their job. Okay. Either that or they've been telling you this whole time and you haven't been listening, because we can see changes metabolically that we know what's coming down the road. It's not if, it's when. We know it's going to happen. The great news, and I tell patients all the time, I love seeing insulin resistance on labs. The reason I love seeing it is because we can fix it. We're not going to let you get to diabetes if you'll work with us. I don't preach, again, diets. I preach every person's different. We must approach every person individualized, and we must see, like, what is it you're not willing to give up? What are you willing to give up? What's kind of in between? Because we all have things you're like, I don't know that I could give that up. Okay, that's really something I love. There's a few things that I always just say, you know what? If you're not willing to bend on these, I can't help you. And that's just like sodas. Probably nothing that gets under my skin more is we're in the Dr. Pepper belt. Where so many of my patients love Dr. Pepper, like, oh, I can't give up Dr. Pepper, and I'm like, well, then I can't keep you from getting diabetes. There's just certain things that aren't negotiable, but you can still have a beer. It's just, maybe we can't have 2, 3, 4 every night. Moderation. As I always tell everybody, we can darn near have anything in this world if it's in the right amounts. And I always joke with my patients, although I'm not really joking, we can literally drink too much water and kill ourselves with water intoxication. Now, it's very hard to do. So by no means am I advocating people drink less water. I'm just saying that even water can be toxic to our bodies if consumed in the wrong amounts.
Yeah, I just think that you need to be looking at things a particular way. There's a decision that you need to make on that. How much of this journey do you own, and how much can you expect a physician to support you? And most people just think the physician is to write them a prescription
Mm-hmm.
take once a day and then don't change anything. And that's the opposite of what we really need to be addressing.
Well, unfortunately, and again, here I go back into the traditional medical system rant, but the traditional medical system sets it up like this, right? Your doctor typically only has 10 to 12 minutes actual time with you. The appointment's booked for 15 minutes. There's 2 or 3 minutes of check-in and cursory, hello, how are you, Steve? And 10 to 12 minutes of real, let's get down to work. How in the hell can I address all this in 10 to 12 minutes? That's the first thing. And so what ends up happening is like, well, Steve, I see your A1C is elevated. Okay, well, here's your prescription for whatever, metformin. And, take this and come back in 90 days. We'll do some blood. We'll see how you're doing. And, oh, by the way, here's some side effects potentially of this, blah, 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 blah. See you later. Okay. That's the stereotypical visit. And as I've said probably on this podcast before, when I went into medicine, I graduated medical school, let's see, in 98. The American Diabetes Association's first line treatment for type 2 diabetes upon diagnosis was nutritional counseling. Okay. They actually gave people a chance. If you go to the American Diabetes website now and look at the protocol, there is no more, nutritional counseling. It's gone. It's medications. First visit, medications. And, so even the American Diabetes Association has given up, in my opinion, on actually changing your patients. It's just like, no, well, it's so what if it's a curable problem? Here's your medicines. Let's move forward. Go look at who sponsors the American Diabetes Association. You'll find these big food companies and drug companies behind them. And I'm not trying to say the American Diabetes Association is a horrible association, but if you really, and I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but just follow the money. You will find that your big box food manufacturers who are making all this processed food are in business with big pharma, and this circle just goes around and round, and it feeds itself. If anyone thinks that, going to the store and buying things in bags and boxes and that these manufacturers have your health in mind, you're wrong. They're trying to feed you. They're trying to get your money that way. They're trying to maybe unintentionally make you sick so they can also fill your prescriptions at the same time. And again, it just goes round and round and round. If patients could just learn in the grocery store to shop on the periphery, we've made big strides. I always say, shop on the periphery, try to stay away from the aisles. The aisles are what really get us sick. If it's in a bag or a box, most likely it's not good for us. I know that's very simplistic, but it's true. If we can stay with more fresh type foods, obviously that's good. And if we could actually cook again, that's a really positive thing too. Something we struggle at our own house is just trying to cook our own food so we can control what's in it.
So how deadly is obesity?
Well, I mean, so as you and I have talked about, obesity, especially the visceral fat, as you know, that we like to talk about, the fat around their organs, I theorize that if you keep your body weight under control, keep your visceral fat in normal range, your chance of inflammatory diseases goes down dramatically, and studies back that up. So I was talking about this with a patient the other day, and I was trying to give them basically an example. And I said, if I could pick great labs on a patient, but I don't know what they do for those great labs. I don't know if they're on statins or what all is involved. Or I can take no labs seen and a perfect body scan. Okay. I would take the perfect body scan. The reason is if I know I've got a perfect body scan. By the way, what do we mean by body scan? We mean a scan that we can actually look at your visceral fat, your muscle mass, your body fat, and your water weight. And if someone gets on my in-body and that scan is perfect, in other words, I look down every parameter and go, man, this is perfect. I know that with a high certainty, their labs are going to back it up when I get them. They're going to look great. Okay. Whereas, you can have falsely positive labs, great labs, by just maybe medications you're taking and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, that type of stuff, it's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. I'm not no means am I trying to say all medicines are bad. Lord knows I prescribe medications every day. So, here at Research Clinic, we try to mold traditional medicine with, more functional medicine type type situations. But I guess my point is that obesity is very deadly. We've already talked about 2/3 of our population in America is overweight or obese. If you are overweight or obese, you're much higher likelihood of all chronic diseases, including cancer. You're more likely to get cancer if you're overweight or obese. So what's the answer there? Well, the answer is either getting your weight under control or keeping your weight under control. And that's why I love getting my younger patients who are still got their weight under control, because maybe we can keep them from ever getting overweight.
So when you say visceral fat, just what the heck is it? Is that like that you see those models and it's that dark yellow fat that's packed around the organs?
Yeah, so it's just the fat that we put under our organs. I always say, everybody's got that Uncle Jimmy that comes around that loves to not wear a shirt, but has a belly that's tight as a watermelon, right? And I always say that's either chock full of visceral fat or cirrhosis, or maybe a little bit of both. Okay, but let's
Mm.
assume he doesn't have cirrhosis. Okay, if you actually had to take that patient's appendix out and you cut them open, you're going to find that belly is just full of visceral fat. And that visceral fat, and especially us guys, have a tendency to put more visceral fat on than women. Although women have really, if this was a relay race, they've really caught up with us. Okay. And oh, by the way, why is that? Why was it that women used to have such a lower rate of heart disease than men in America? Well, because us guys were the ones that ate bad, but the women typically still ate pretty well. Well, unfortunately, in America now, the women eat just as bad as the men do. And many times they eat just as much as the men do. So we've now effectively made them as unhealthy as us through, and we can talk about maybe some of the ways to clean up diet, just some tips and things. But our American diet, as I always say, which is chock full of sugar and chock full of I'm not necessarily going to say fat, because there's good fats, bad fats, but just it's my humble opinion that sugar is the downfall of America. If we could find a way to limit / remove most sugar out of our diet, the vast majority of us would do great. That's not easy. Sugar is extremely, extremely addictive. I am a sugar addict. I will admit it. Okay. I need to be in a 12-step program for sugar, consumption. I actually just restarted this week. I've had this ongoing on again, off again bet with my son about, who will eat sugar next. And I do it mainly for him because he's gained a little bit of his weight back, maybe like 6 pounds. And he just drops weight so fast when we do this bet, because he quits eating sugar. And it helps me too, because I want to take his money. So anyway, but we all have addictions in some form or fashion. I've never been all that intrigued by alcohol. Alcohol's not my thing. Do I drink? Yeah, I do, but not that much. But sugar, that's a different scenario for me.
I think the way that I started to look at food was, all right, I'm avoiding sugar. I'm not drinking the sodas. But then when I look at my plate and it's got potatoes or rice or bread, that to your body is really just sugar, because it's
Mhm.
converted into sugar, and then you have to start pumping insulin. And that's where the whole system starts to break down. So I think I had to change the way I just looked at what was on my plate.
Yeah, and this is not hard. Like, again, patients sometimes are surprised when they say, "Okay, doc, can you give me a nutritional packet or something?" And I'm like, "Well, that's not really how we do it here. We first want to find out what your likes and dislikes are. So, and those things again that you're not willing to give up, and things you are willing to give up, things you're willing to minimize." I like the word minimize. And,
Mhm.
and that's what I always tell patients is that you don't need me to tell you. And if you do, you got bigger problems, that cakes, candies, pies, sodas are bad for you. Okay. You don't need me to say that. I love how some candies say a fat-free food on it. Like, oh yeah, like that makes it healthy. Um, so, but I am always blown away by how many people don't understand that many of the foods that they're eating turn into sugar as soon as their body breaks it down. So I always use the analogy. So it's called glycemic index. Glycemic index of sugar is 1. So, you kind of work off of that. The glycemic index of a potato is 1. So there really is no nutritional difference than a packet of sugar and a potato. And when you tell people that, they're like, "What? You mean like there's sugar in my potatoes?" And I go, "Yes, it's all sugar. That's what it is." Like, you know, um, we have a saying at research, and it's if it's white and you eat it and it's not cauliflower, it's probably not good for you. Okay. So, your bread, your rice, your pasta, your corn, potatoes. I am a good West Texas boy, and those are staples.
Mhm.
So if I go in a room and I tell a good old rancher that he's no longer able to ever have bread, rice, pasta, corn, and potatoes, he's going to, walk right out of my clinic and never come back. But what I say is okay, let's now think of bread, rice, pasta, corn, and potatoes and everything that entails. And let's try to dabble in that group maybe 3 or 4 times a week. But other than that, let's try to stay away from that group. Let's really try to say, okay, for lunch, let's not have the hamburger. Okay. Like I always joke, at least wrap it in lettuce and like get rid of the bun. Or let's just start thinking, what are these little things that I can do, to change some of these bad habits? But they got to be something that you're willing to do forever. Something that Steve was willing to say, you know what? I really don't care about the bun. That doesn't bother me. Now, I will say this, though, and I do tell patients once we get to goal, it is easier to maintain. Maintaining weight is much easier than losing weight. And sometimes we can lessen those restrictions maybe a little bit, but they still have to follow the same principles, which is low glycemic. It's basically what keto is based off of, is keeping carbs out of your diet. And I tell patients, I don't mind keto. My issue with keto is that I don't think keto is sustainable for most people long term. Actually, I know it's not. Studies have proven that going keto, they've looked at some long term studies, and at 1 year, basically 0% of people were still doing keto at a year. I think keto can be really, really helpful for short periods of time if we need to get some weight off pretty fast. But I do like low carbohydrate diets. I like moderate to high protein diets with low carbohydrate. So I always say not keto, but low. The American government, our FDA, still recommends right now, today, that we eat 50% carbs per meal, which is such, pardon my French, bullshit. That's what we're killing America this way. Okay. So we can't listen to our government. They don't know what they're talking about when it comes to nutrition. The food pyramid still drives me crazy today, and, makes me go bonkers thinking about that. I try to tell patients 20-25% carbohydrate or less per meal is kind of a good number. But I also don't like my patients counting peas and carrots. I don't think that's sustainable either. I try to teach them what's good, what's bad, how to put them together, and just making good choices. Because the truth is, if a food is good for us, we can eat larger amounts of it without any problems. And this thought that it's all about calorie count is BS as well. The analogy I always use there. So 1,000 calories is what you think you need. So if you drink 1,000 calories of Coke a day, that's good for you then, right? Because it's 1,000 calories versus maybe 1,000 calories of broccoli and, grilled chicken. Like, well, obviously the grilled chicken and broccoli is better. Well, yeah, that's because calorie count doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I can't stand calorie counting. That just doesn't matter. It's about the quality of the foods that we're eating. Another misnomer is I exercise to lose weight. Well, you probably don't. You probably don't. Most people are surprised that, hard cardio or hard workouts actually don't do much for weight loss. They're amazing. I want you to do it. They're good for our muscles, our ligaments, our tendons, our heart, our brains. We need it. God bless stress reduction. But actually, just a slow, steady walk is really all that burns fat. People are really blown away by that. Like, oh, you recommend just walking for fat burning? Yeah, that's what I recommend, is walking for fat burning. You can go do your CrossFit workouts. Those are great, but they're not going to do much for actual fat burning. They're going to make your muscles look better. You're going to be more toned. That's awesome. Love that. But you just got to know, it's all about trying to educate your patients, your clients on, what exactly our goals are and how we're going to get to those goals.
You think if you got a patient that comes in, they're 45 years old and they're in a condition, and you ask them, how long did it take you to get to this condition? It could be 25 years.
Hmm.
It- that they've had some sort of lifestyle that has added up to whatever their condition is. And so to expect that a few little changes in a year, I'm going to be in back to a, a prime condition. That's not a proper expectation. And I think that when you're looking at that plate of food, that you've been having 60, 70% carbs, and you're looking at it right, you could change it to just 20 or 30% and still make a big long-term impact for the next coming 20 years. It's a matter of looking at things in a different perspective. The other thing that you really talk about is intermittent fasting, or at
Hmm.
least longer windows of going without eating. That
Hmm.
allows your body to adjust and clean up. And then the peptide impact is big. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually, curiously enough, this morning I was reading about a lineman, an offensive lineman from the NFL, who has lost 100 pounds because he retired, and he realized, really, I think his last name was Okung. I think he played for Seattle and a couple other teams. I've actually followed him because he was always been kind of unique because he was his own agent, and so kind of a smart intellect guy. And he basically said in his article that I read that he knew that if he stayed at that weight, that it was going to have detrimental effects. So he needed the weight to do his job, and now he's retired, and now he's lost it. And it was funny because they said, "Well, what's one of the main ways that you've lost the weight?" And guess what he said? Fasting. Um, Now he did a really extended fast. He's an active faster, and he claims to have done a 40-day water only fast. That sounds beyond anything I would ever ask.
Sounds like someone that like him would attempt, right? Because they hold themselves to such a competitive standard.
And you hear people that do those type of fast, and you will, yes, true, because he's already got that kind of a mindset being a professional athlete, right? But when you do those extended fasts, by the way, 5 days is the longest I've ever done, and I thought I was going to die, but it did get, yeah, did get great results. Now we try to routinely, my wife and I try to do twice a year a 48 to 72 hour fast, which is amazing and not too hard to do. But people always report like spiritual improvements and these connecting with others better with these long fasts because of all the endorphins and the detoxes and all that sort of thing. But not to go down that path too much. Why does fasting work? And I just always quickly tell my patients that why do we get fat? We get fat in America because we eat all the time. We eat bad foods all the time, causes our blood sugar levels to go up, causes our insulin levels to go up. Insulin levels, need to think of insulin like kryptonite to Superman. So insulin to metabolism, kryptonite to Superman. Okay. It basically just wrecks our metabolism. And now we're not burning calories that we're supposed to. We're taking in the wrong calories. You're probably taking in too many calories. Yes, I know I said don't calorie count. I say don't calorie count good calories. Okay. You probably do need to calorie count bad calories. And so, but this process goes on and on, like you said, not for a day, not 2 days, not a week, for months, years, decades. Okay. It's now starting in most of our patients as teenagers, and they show up on our doorstep at 35, 40, 45, 50. They've had 20 plus years of metabolic imbalance, and here they are. Okay. And so when you fast, when you do like a 16-hour fast, the simplest way I can explain it is you're giving your body a break. If you're not putting things in your mouth food wise for 16 hours, your body only has it can only lower because you're not shoving sugar in your mouth. It lowers those blood sugar levels, lowers insulin levels, and is able to help people. Again, that metabolism is able to ramp back up with chronic fasting. Oh, by the way, so when you put this fat on, another thing I like to tell my patients is I know this is 2023. I realize there's a grocery store on pretty much every corner. Okay. Your bodies don't know that. Our bodies are still cavemen in this way. Okay. Back in the day when we had to run around with a spear and spear something and cook it and eat it, we kind of like hunted and feasted is what we did. We found something. We didn't have a refrigerator. We consumed everything we could consume of it. we kind of were fat and happy for a while, and then we went back out and tried to find something else to kill. So when we do put on fat, our body always thinks that it's prepping for the worst. It's prepping for the fact that Steve isn't going to be able to kill I don't know, an antelope for the next month, and I need this fat to hang on to so that if he can't kill something, I have some reserves. Well, it doesn't realize we got freaking HEB, Albertsons, whatever on every corner. We're not going to go more than a day without eating. So my point of that story is our body doesn't want to utilize fat. It wants to just store it away, hang on to it for a rainy day. When you chronically fast, it forces your body to start utilizing that fat. Fatty acid metabolism is what we call it, utilizing a fat for fuel. It's the most efficient way. It's a very efficient fuel, but you got to force your body back into it. The good news is once you start forcing your body to use fat for fuel, it's like, oh, okay, I've been using fat for fuel here. I haven't died. Steve's feed me appropriately. It kind of learns new tricks, and it can go that way. But with our current lifestyles that many of us lead, it just puts away more fat, more fat, more fat. That's why exercise doesn't typically work when we go in and do cardio. It just doesn't burn that. It doesn't give you the fatty acid metabolism you're looking for. So yes, starts with diet. Fasting, I think, is crucial. I know for a fact my patients that fast lose weight faster than my patients do not fast. See it every day. I can nearly look at their scan before I walk in the room and go, Steve, you're not fasting, or Steve, you are fasting, by just looking at their scans. Then we use GLP-1 agonists, the semaglutides and the tirzepatides of the world, to work on that hypothalamus of the brain to downgrade our appetite, to increase our feeling of fullness when we do eat, to work on that. They're insulinogenic, so working on that insulin response, making it more efficient. And then also it downregulates cravings for alcohol or sugar. So that's kind of helping our human side of things, our normal cravings and weaknesses that we all have, because everybody's got them. If you say you don't, you're lying to me. We've all got weaknesses somewhere. And so it's helping on that side of the fence, because yes, some people will just flat out fail. They don't have the mental fortitude to hang in there because their habits have been there for so long. But then if we can get them for a few months of not eating sugar and eating smaller amounts and fasting, then it becomes normal. And then everything's okay. And oh, by the way, if I can just get my patients to be active, if I can just get them giving me a 30-minute brisk walk 3-4 times a week with their loved one or their family or their friends or whomever, that's a great way to start burning fat. Then we can start mixing in little cool things like ketone aid, which is ketone bodies. Because remember how we talked about most people can't stay up with a ketogenic diet. So let's talk about real briefly for maybe a minute on ketogenic diet. It takes days to get into ketogenesis, right? It takes one meal of carbs to take you out of ketogenesis, and then it takes us days to get back in it. But we know when we do 5 to 10 mLs of ketone aid, which are ketone bodies, we have now put ourselves effectively in ketogenesis for around 4 hours. So we get all those positive benefits of feeling better, better mental clarity, better exercise performance, and better fatty acid metabolism for that 4 hours of ketogenesis. But yet then we can eat our normal meals and actually kind of pop in and out of ketogenesis, which in my opinion is actually the best way to use ketogenesis, is kind of in and out. So like you said, there's no one way to fix it.
I want to say that when I realized that the perfect brain food is you and keto, or the fat is
the ketone bodies,
right? That when your brain is getting to run on that energy, you're thinking more clearly, you're reducing your Alzheimer concern, you're just more in a zone, and you're getting what you desire. You get when you drink a cup of coffee, you're getting it in a natural way, and plus it's just a great energy for your cells as well.
No, it's the best energy. I tell patients it's like racing fuel for humans. If you have a race car and you're going to go to the track to do runs, you're not sticking, unleaded in it. You've got racing fuel that you're putting in that engine because it's going to burn more efficiently, give you more horsepower. Ketone aid or ketone bodies, ketone aid, is the only manufacturer in America of these. Don't, please, patients, don't fall or don't fall for these multi-level pyramid scheme ketone drinks that are out there. They're not ketone bodies. Those don't work. They put caffeine in them. That's how they're giving you the energy. The great thing about ketone aid K2s is there's no caffeine in that. That's just pure ketone bodies. Tastes god awful, but it works amazingly. The most efficient fuel for our body is ketone bodies. That's why we feel better and have better brain function in ketogenesis, or ketogenic diet. Again, there are more gallstones and kidney stones seen in long-term ketogenic diets, but the main reason I don't like ketogenesis long-term is who can do it. You might have 1 in 20 that really sticks with it, but 19 are going to do it for a couple weeks, and they're going to be like, or they think they're doing it. To me, that's the worst thing ever, is to think you're doing something when you're really not. Like, in other words, just pure ignorance. Like, think you're eating right. Like the rice cake. Oh my God, the rice cake. One of the worst foods on earth. But I used to joke that used to be every secretary's in their desk drawer. I'm eating healthy today. I'm going to eat a rice cake for a snack. Oh my God, let me just take the sugar packets out and pour them down my throat. Okay. That's ignorance. That think you're doing so, or fruit. Fruit's another great example. I'll never forget when I don't remember. I'm not going to name names, but they posted something like, I'm starting my healthy eating today. And for lunch, they had this humongous bowl of fruit. Like, oh my God. No, you're not. But you think you are, right? And so that's what happens a lot with ketogenic diets, is people think they're doing ketogenesis. They're like, well, I only had a little bit of carbs for lunch. No, you had a lot of carbs. You're not in ketogenesis anymore, and you're not going to be for a few days. So not everybody, though, is going to be willing to test their urine or breathe in those little machines that make sure you're in, ketogenesis. Those people who do that, they're truly in ketogenesis. But most people are dabbling with ketogenesis, and it's like, yeah, you're not really getting there.
Yeah. So if someone's listening to this and it's been nagging at them in the back of their mind, they need to do this, but they've run into all the common headwinds. Holidays knock you off course. People ask you, why are you eating different? That you're just fighting all these headwinds. What's it if they were to reach out and come see you? What does it look like working with you?
Yeah, so it just starts with, we typically do like to get lab work on our patients before we even, at least a baseline metabolic evaluation, so that we have more data to talk to you about. I'll give you a great example. I saw a patient who came to me from another provider recently, and this patient had not been having success with their weight loss program. This other provider does similar things to us. And by the way, not casting any stones with this other provider, but they do similar things. And she'd been on their program for about 9 to 10 months. And I just started not like grilling her, but just started asking fairly simple questions. And I quickly realized there'd been no counseling whatsoever with this patient, none whatsoever. And then I went in reverse, got labs, and of course labs came back very insulin resistant patient. And so the reason this patient hasn't been losing weight is they weren't ever taught. They were just said, here's this GLP-1 agonist, inject it once a week, and you're going to lose weight like crazy, and life will be good. And that's just not the way it works. There's so much more to it than that. So as we talked about on a prior podcast about the doctor that went on Fox News and said, all these GLP-1s do is make people lose weight, and when you come off of them, you're going to gain the weight back. So it's a big waste of time, basically is what the doctor said. And you know what? And at that time I said, well, that's a bunch of bullshit. But as I've thought about it, there's some truth to that statement. If a provider's not doing their job, there is some truth to that statement. That patient might lose weight just because they're eating less. Are they losing muscle along with it? Maybe. We didn't even discuss that. We got to maintain muscle mass as we lose weight. Timing of our foods is really important too, or the order of our foods. I always tell patients, just one really quick tip is, if you got a protein and you've got a vegetable and you got just a pure starchy carb, eat that protein first, move over to that clean vegetable, eat completely, like finish off the steak, move to the zucchini, finish it off. Guess what happens? Most of the time when you get to those mashed potatoes, you're full. You don't even want them at that point. But also, if you eat in that order, you're slowing the release of sugar into your bloodstream by putting that protein in first. So you're lessening that sugar spike, lessening that insulin spike that corresponds to that. But we start with labs. We start with evaluation. I start to just try to get to know the patient, try to get to know where they're inefficiencies may be in their life, where we can kind of help. Again, their likes, dislikes, what we can do, what we can't do. And you said something earlier that really struck home with me is I try to set realistic. Well, first I want to know what their goals are. Okay, does Betsy want to weigh 93 pounds and she's 5'8"? Well, if so, we don't have realistic goals. Okay, making sure their goals are realistic, and then making sure they have a corresponding realistic timeline. Sometimes I tell patients 2 years, like, hey, this is going to take me a couple of years because, and then if they exceed that, I go, hey, if you're like my star pupil and you exceed that and you do it in a year, awesome. But it does me no good to think it's going to be 2 years, tell you one, and then you're upset when it comes a year and you haven't got to where you want to be. Because, like you said, Steve, we don't get to these places overnight. No one does. They take years, decades to get there. We're not going to reverse all these things. But as long as we have a clear, concise path that our patients, I believe, understand and buy into, then generally we can have really good success.
Yeah, one day I just thought about it. We we work hard at becoming overweight. When you
Mm-hmm.
think about you eat 4 meals a day,
Mm-hmm.
you have to change your schedule around to accommodate that. There's a lot of hard work that we put into getting to whatever our condition is, whether we realized it or not. And so it's going to take just as much dedication to achieve a more healthy result. You just need to think about it different and be committed to it. Just like it, it might have been easy after a while, but you've been doing it for decades.
Yeah, and remember, you're going to fall off the wagon at times, and
Yeah.
not willing to give up. I always say you got to dust yourself off, get the tools back out of the toolbox, and go back to work. We all fall. We all fall occasionally. We go out of town for the weekend or something, and it just leads to maybe a week to 10 days of kind of not doing what we need to do. But we can cry about it. That's fine. I always say, do it, cry, get your tears out, and then let's put our big boy pants back on and keep moving forward. And as long as we can look and clips, like if we can look at every quarter and go, okay, Steve, you move forward in all these metrics over the last quarter, even if it's small, it's still moving forward. We'd like for it to be fast, of course, and that just depends on the level of dedication of the patient. But sometimes we don't even move forward, and this is an important, I think, point that I try to make with my patients. Sometimes the body scan doesn't change in the first quarter much. Like, oh, my friend Susie, she comes here and she lost blah, 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 blah. And I say, well, I can't comment on Susie because that's HIPAA, but you're insulin resistant. Until we fix this insulin resistance, you're not going to lose the weight like other normal patients do. So we can follow those labs and make some changes and keep working at it. Like, look, now you're no longer insulin resistant. And typically when we can get that gate to finally fall, the insulin resistance gate to fall, then that weight starts really coming off those patients. And truly, I can say this, nothing makes me happier than the look on people's faces when you can show them their labs went from very abnormal to really good. And also when they see their scans and they get into normal ranges on body fat and muscle masses. And the good news is I guess it's because it's my mantra, but my patients understand that we're all about muscle around here and we're not trying to lose muscle in this process. So, my patients really buy into that and they really try to help me, maintain their muscle mass at the same time, because when you are on a GLP-1 agonist, you're not as hungry. You have to make sure it's very much like a person that's had stomach surgery, for weight loss. You have to make sure and get your protein levels in because you must have those building blocks for muscle or you'll start pulling muscle for fuel.
So the way to reach out to Dr. Kris, if you want to go and schedule a time to come in for a consultation.
We can
It's
talk
the
about consolations. That's fine.
so it's the researchclinic.com. You just go to their website and you can schedule an appointment and come in and get your plan together. And again, this is not, you come in and Dr. Kris goes, here's your prescription, see you again. You just keep doing what you're doing. This is about you and Dr. Kris working together to accomplish a long-term goal that's going to take some time and dedication. It's going to take a change of lifestyle. And those are the folks that really excel in this relationship with the research clinic.
Yeah, one last thing, Steve, just real quick too, is that it's a building process. I always tell my patients the first visit's typically an hour, and it's kind of like we have a saying in medical school. It's like getting hit in the face with a fire hydrant, and you only kind of retain what you swallow. And so I really try to build on, and so does my other providers. We try to build on every visit, kind of pick up where we left off. Like try to. Because you kind of start with some little tips like, okay, Steve, go implement these little tips. And then you might 6 months, 9 months be down the road. We might be talking about Alka-Seltzer Gold, or we might be talking about, whatever. We just try to, very few patients are going to do 43 things on the first visit. So we just try to layer it in as they get better at what they do. And then I tell my patients the last thing, and then I'll shut up, is that I will put the level of effort into their health that they show me back. And so I have some patients that I realize I still help them, but I realize they're not really doing much of what I ask. Good news is that's a small number. And then others are just like craving, like, what else? What's next? Where do we go from here? And so those are really refreshing patients.
All right, Dr. Kris, excellent conversation. That's theresearchclinic.com. And now I'm going to roll out this fancy little outro. Good show today, Dr. Kris.
Thank you, Steve. You as well.
All right. Thanks for joining the Dr. Kris podcast. If you learned something today and you want to connect and get more information, visit our website, www.DrKris.Life, where you can find more great information or even schedule a time to learn how you can engage with Dr. Kris. Be sure to follow, like, share, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dr. Kris podcast.